The Tolkien Road, episode 174, Lord of the Rings TV Second Age Deep Dive, a description of Númenor. Hello and welcome to the Tolkien Road, episode 174. John here. Greta, what's up?
Hey. Not much.
Not much?
What's up with you?
Ain't a whole lot up.
No?
Nope.
All right.
I'm ready to get this show on the road. How about you?
Same. Yeah,
right.
definitely.
Let's-
We have an absolutely thrilling edge of your seat episode for everyone today.
Are you being sarcastic?
No. Me sarcastic? Come on now.
Girl,
What?
check the sarcasm.
Just trying to keep it light, that's all.
Hey, yeah, this is, so we're talking about a description of the island of Númenor, which is a chapter in Unfinished Tales. I'll be honest, it's not the most exciting thing. It's not exactly a narrative so much as it is a description of the island of Númenor, which, like I said just a second ago, is the title of this chapter.
Right.
It's a little more than that. There's a little more in it, and I think there are some interesting tidbits. And my goal here is not to go bit by bit and talk about every single detail of geography that Tolkien mentions necessarily, but really just to pick out the highlights.
Okay.
So that's the goal here, and I think it'll be helpful for us to, again, the whole goal of this little series we're doing on the Second Age Deep Dive is to really familiarize ourselves with these things, which probably most of us are not super familiar with, right? Because the Second Age is not the one that people read most about. It goes Third Age, because that's Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, and then First Age, which is most of the Silmarillion, and then Second Age, because Akalabaith and of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, which part of that's in the Second Age, are tacked on to the Silmarillion. So, yeah.
I wasn't trying to imply that I thought I was a bad use or unworthwhile or anything.
Yeah, we don't have to fight about this.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just trying to be silly. That's all.
Not in front of the audience.
Okay, fine. We'll save it for later. But you know what I was thinking when I was reading through this? Because really, like, our big point in doing this is to get everybody ready, kind of prepped for the Amazon show, right?
Yep.
So I was thinking about this and, like, all these details that we're going to be talking about at Númenor and everything. And I was like, I really hope we're not setting our listeners up to, like, to hate on the show because they do everything wrong. You know?
Well, that's
how, like, when you read something and you know exactly how it's supposed to be and then it's not.
I think the risk is actually the major risk is actually reversed, right?
Okay.
The real risk is that, and I don't think this is going to happen because I think this is too big an investment to mess it up and just kind of what's maybe an analogy to go all, like, I don't know, 1960s Batman on this or something like that, right? Nothing. 'Cause I know that's supposed to be like campy and everything like that, but we'll just use that as our whipping boy or something like that right now, right? I don't think that that's going to happen because they've got a really good team in place.
Really good team, yeah.
And I think there's too much invested, and we know there's other people who are kind of like the quality checks that the Tolkien estate has put in place. So in my mind, like, if people, it's up to them. It's up to the production team to mess this up, right?
Oh,
like,
of course, yeah.
It's theirs. Like, if they mess this up with the investment and all the resources that have put at their disposal, all the time they have to think about this, I don't really know what to say to that, right?
Yeah.
And people are gonna love it anyway, right?
They are.
Because it's Lord of the Rings, because it's Middle Earth, because it's Tolkien stuff.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of people are gonna love it unless it's just a total disaster on every level, right?
Which we fully expect it not to be,
right?
Obviously.
So really, I view it as like we are helping people to be beefed up and get and make sure. I don't know that they really. I am not self-deluded enough to think that the people who are making the show care one wink about what I say or you say, or even are aware of who we are. Which get with it, guys. But anyway, but let's be realistic. But this is, we want to prepare ourselves. We want to know what this stuff actually looks like so that we go into the show and when we watch, and hopefully we pick up on the detail and the nuance that they've baked into the show, because a good show does that, right? Then we'll be like, oh, that's what this place is, and oh, that's what this place is, and so on and so on and so forth, right?
Right.
I want to be an attentive
An
TV watcher,
informed
right?
TV watcher, yeah.
Like,
as I do as well.
I don't like watching TV in that like sort of passive way, right? Like I like to be kind of involved and kind of do a deep dive, especially if I'm really into something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. No, good answer.
Enough of the soapbox. Hey, newest patrons, real quick. Well, newest patron, we have one this week, Robert Sleeth.
Hey,
so,
Robert. Thank you.
Thank you for your pledge. If you want to become a patron, you can head on over to patreon.com/TolkienRoad and pledge $1 or more per episode. You can, of course, set a monthly limit if you don't want to go above a certain amount in this course of a month. Right now, we're hitting about one episode a week. So if you were to pledge $1 a month or $1 per episode unlimited, you probably wouldn't pay any more than like $4 or $5, like $5 on those odd months where there's 5 weeks. But anyway, that's what you need to do if you want to become a patron of the show. If you become a patron of the show, you get our very deep appreciation for doing so. You get added to the list of patrons at the end of each episode, and you get new episodes early, and over 40 bonus videos not available elsewhere. Actually, special thanks for Robert, because he made me aware that actually all those bonus videos that I was talking about last time were not actually accessible for our patrons, so I went back and I fixed that. So they should all be available now, and you can go and watch those when you run out of stuff to listen to with the Tolkien Road. And eventually I am going to get those kind of set up in the audio feed so that you can download or add to your podcatcher the special RSS feed for patrons only for the Tolkien Road, and then you can get all the freebie audio stuff that comes in there. Yeah, and then my latest freebie is a free copy of my article, All Tales May Come True, concerning Tolkien's creative mysticism for patrons only over there. So head on over to patreon.com/TolkienRoad and check all that out.
Yes, please.
Don't forget to rate us on iTunes. Leave us a 5-star rating. It's the easiest way to help get the word out about our show. You can leave a review, too, if you want to, and say all kinds of nice things about us. And but that just really simple action of just hitting that 5 stars in iTunes makes a big difference for us. So thank you for everybody who has done that, and thank you for all those who are listening who are going to do that right now.
Yes, right now. We'll pause for a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we did have one speak pipe this week.
Oh, yay.
From
Yay,
Ricky
yay,
S.
yay.
Now, here's the thing about this. Unfortunately, it sounds like Ricky actually had some really good stuff to say, but it didn't. I don't know what the deal was. The audio quality is not great. It kind of cuts out at different parts. I'm going to play it anyway. I'd encourage Ricky, if you wanted to re-record it, to send it along, but he wasn't able to, and that's cool. So we're going to go ahead and play it as he sent it and do our best to react to it that way. So here we go.
The shadow falling on Númenor is really the darkening of Númenor, the power of Morgoth reaching in from the void and corrupting the hearts of men. That was already there. He'd already done that in the east of Middle-earth before men came to Beleriand and became acquainted with the elves. There had already been a darkening of their hearts as to what death was. And this was becoming more prevalent in Númenor, that their lengthened lifespan was not enough, and therefore they started looking for ways to extend life and to become immortal. And in the long run, eventually resenting the elves and resenting the Valar, and deeming themselves lords of the earth, basically.
Okay. So I think I caught most of that. I think what Ricky was trying to do was help us out. On last week's episode, we had... first of all, I say thank you, Ricky.
Yes, thank you.
And on last week's episode, we had raised that question, what is the shadow, right? Because it refers to the shadow. Mm-hmm. And it's something that comes up in all over Tolkien's works. And, I mean, I had a kind of a general idea, but I was interested to see how it would play out in the Second Age and the stories of the Second Age. Because at some point in the history of Númenor, it's kind of like the shadow falls on Númenor, right? And I had some sense of that, but I really appreciate Ricky weighing in here and kind of refreshing how that, in a very short way, like how that kind of spans over the entirety of the history of Middle Earth, from the shadow cast by Morgoth upon the first men, right? There's this awareness of death, right? They say like a shadow lies behind. We don't really know what it's all about. So maybe the shadow, when it really comes down to it, is this fear. It's this fear of death, or it's maybe like a very pessimistic view of even like the Valar and of Iluvatar. It's kind of Morgoth's original thing with men to make them want to rebel against Iluvatar and against the Valar, and serve him by saying like, look, they're withholding immortality from you.
Right.
They're forcing you to have to suffer this death thing, which is really scary, by the way. Right. So I think this is, I really hope that this is a big part of one of the big themes of this show, because I think this was a very important topic, a very important theme in Tolkien's mind, right? Because you can see it in the stories of the Third Age, right? I was thinking about what happens with Denethor, right? And where he, at the end of Lord of the Rings,
with the despair,
he despairs, right? Yeah. Instead of being like, I'm going to hold out, right, and do my duty as a man, even though death may come to me, I'm still going to fight the good fight, right. And so like I think that's one place you see the shadow, like it talks about the shadow falling on different places, right? So it's really interesting, because I think the shadow at the end of the day is this sense of futility. It's this sense of like existential darkness.
Yeah,
right?
Just like a chasing of the wind, and vanities of vanities, and is any of this worth anything anyway?
Yeah.
That makes sense. It does, which is really interesting, because I know Tolkien, and I think what we've come to understand through reading all that we have so far is that really death is meant to be a gift. And so, I mean, that's really how evil works, is it twists things that are meant for good and makes people think that they're evil. And that's clearly what Morgoth did here.
Absolutely.
He distorted the the intent of the Valar when it came to death. Yeah,
totally. So I'm really looking forward to how this show explores that topic, and I think we're to maybe we'll kind of touch on that in when we talk about this chapter today. So cool. Thanks for your note, Ricky.
Yes, thank you, Ricky.
Hey, so by the way, the quickest way to get heard on our podcast is to use the voicemail option on the website tolkienroad.com, just like Ricky did, and like the other John and Katarina did the week before that. That's the quickest way to be heard. I do want to say our next episode will be a mailbag episode for September. So we've got a lot of stuff we haven't that people have sent us that we haven't talked about. We used to do it on every episode, kind of try to do a weekly mailbag, and I think it's too much, and I think it really gives us an opportunity to dive into some of the things that people have sent us. So the cutoff for this month's mailbag episode will be Tuesday, September 10th. So that's this coming Tuesday. So if you're listening to this on Monday, then
get on it.
You need to get on it if you want to be heard on this month's episode. If not, if you hear this later and it's already past the September 10th date, feel free to go ahead and send us. And I'm hoping to make this mailbag thing a regular monthly thing anyway, so you'll just be heard on the next mailbag episode. So
sounds good.
Make sure to send your mail to tolkienroadpodcast@gmail.com. We've got a lot of other places where people stay in touch with us: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, other email addresses, which I've tried to forward to Tolkien Road Podcast. If there's something really cool there, like I might try and get it onto the episode if it's maybe a quieter month. But if you want to be heard on the mailbag episode, send it to tolkienroadpodcast@gmail.com. Word. All right. So, let's talk about a description of Númenor.
Let's do it.
All right. So, we'll make sure we link again to the map in the show notes that Lord of the Rings TV has up. I think it's pretty close. I have not done a close comparison of it to the one that's in the book here, but it's in your copy of the book, right?
Oh, I haven't even looked.
Yeah. So there is a depiction, an illustration of the map of Numenor in Unfinished Tales, at least in my Kindle copy that I'm using here. Well, you want to look here. So right there, right? So
there wasn't one in the chapter.
well, it's at the beginning right here, I think. Oh, maybe not. That's weird.
I think it might be at the beginning of the whole book.
Yeah, let's see here. Or maybe at the end.
I looked at the end.
Or maybe in the middle. Oh,
Anywhere,
what's going
somewhere,
on?
please.
There we go.
Ah, there it is. Okay.
Yeah, I like how Kindle did it better. It was better to put it there. Okay, so it starts off, this chapter starts off by saying, not much is remembered of Númenor because most of the records perished in the downfall, right? So
Right.
by now, if you've listened to any episodes about the Second Age we've done, you realize that Númenor is no longer in existence in the Third Age, in the times of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So really, all of the records of this great civilization, for the most part, have been lost, except for just a few things that were carried on through the history of Gondor, because Gondor is a descendant kingdom from Númenor.
Right.
So, but really, Númenor went away so quickly that they weren't able to save so much of it, right? So it's kind of a tragedy that one of the big tragedies, the history of this great civilization, is essentially lost.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is fitting because we won't get too far into this today, but Númenor is kind of Tolkien's own story of Atlantis, right? Of the lost kingdom of Atlantis, right?
Okay.
So, so this is the best known story, unfortunately, of Númenor was that of Ar-Pharazôn, right, and his impious armada, right? So Ar-Pharazôn, who was the action, this is kind of like Númenor, this great kingdom, and the thing they're known for is like the worst possible thing that they did, right? Which was trying to assault Valinor, and which led directly to their downfall. So that's unfortunate, but it's the truth. So the chapter really gets into the meat by giving us the layout of the island, and so it's a star-shaped island, and to the north, the Northlands is called Forostar. It's kind of neat that most of these places
Yeah,
are
they have
called
star in the word. Yeah, in the name.
I'm sure that I think in the language it actually means something, but I didn't look too close. It probably just means land or something like that. So Forostar, and then there's Hyanustar, which is the Westlands. So Forostar is if you're looking at the map, it's the one that juts out to the north, right? Hyanustar is the one that juts out to the west, the Westlands. Hyanustar is the southwestern one. Hyanustar is the southeastern one, and Orostar is the eastward one. All right, so you got five peninsulas really of this island, right? That help form this star shape.
Yes.
So
They're all like, did you say peninsulas?
what's that?
Is that what you said, peninsulas?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
That's
what they are.
Yes, indeed. So Forostar is not very fertile, and it's later the site of Tar Maneldor's Tower of the Stars, right? So one of the kings, I believe one of the kings of Númenor, Tar Maneldor, yeah, he would be a king because he has Tar at the beginning of his name. Tar Maneldor builds this tower so he can kind of like look at the stars, right, up on Forostar.
So there wasn't any like military reason for that tower. It was simply to stargaze.
Right, yeah, and we actually learned that Númenor was not a militaristic society at all.
Like even the guns and not the guns, but the bows and the different weapons they did fashion were for practical things like hunting.
Right,
and
exactly.
Building.
Hyanustar to the Westlands were also not very fertile, but they did have the great haven of Eldalande the Green, and that was the main haven for visitors from Erisea, right? Which is Tol Erisea is the lonely island. That's the island where many of the Teleri lived, right? So,
yes.
And it's maybe the closest. It's the closest part of Valinor to Númenor. So that's a neat thing is that they actually, though they couldn't visit Valinor themselves, they did have visitors from Tol Erisea, which is cool, and I hope that's something we get to see in the show.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So if you look at your map, right, Eldalande is, you can kind of see it pointing to it in the Bay of Eldana, the western bay of the island, and then Eldalande is right there. It's almost like halfway between Untitled and Hyanustar, but apparently it was considered part of Untitled according to this chapter. Then you have Hyanustar, which is the southwestern lands, and they were mountainous and contained vineyards in the east. So this was where all the good stuff came from, apparently.
That made me think of Seattle.
Oh yeah,
with all the mountains out there, but then also amazing vineyards.
well, yeah, but that's the Northwest Lands.
I know, but still.
I guess if you're Canadian, it's the Southwest Lands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's what I was thinking of. No, just the combination of mountains and vineyards. It made me think of the Pac Northwest.
Yeah, if I was taking a trip to Númenor, I definitely want to make sure and hit up the vineyards of Hyanustar.
Yeah, for reals.
Yeah. And by the way, it's helpful on this map in the book. There are little mountain representations, I guess, to give you an idea of where the highlands really are in the different parts of the island.
This is a map that Tolkien would have drawn, yes? Or do we not know?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe it is, or it's at least based very closely on something he drew.
Got it.
Christopher may have drawn it from something else that he drew, but it's at least something that the Tolkien men did create.
Good to know.
And by the way, there is a helpful little distance scale there. And so the island is about darn it. My Kindle
doesn't it tell us how long
changed
it
orientation on me. All right. We'll go back to that.
I thought it said.
What?
Are you trying to figure out how big it is?
I'm trying to get back to the
I thought it said in the chapter.
It does, but I was just gonna say, if you want to get an idea of the size, right, you can look at the map and be like, okay, that's about 250 right there. So what did it say, like 300?
Yeah, it was somewhere between 300 and 400.
300
I think.
from north to south.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so roughly those are rough numbers. But I mean, I'm trying to think of like how far, like we live in Tennessee. How far across is Tennessee? If we drive and we live close to Nashville, which is the middle of the state.
The middle, yeah.
So it takes us, it's about 200 miles to Memphis from where we live, I think. It's about a 3-hour drive, so that seems about right.
Okay.
So there 200 and then maybe 200.
The other way.
Yeah, so it's about
400.
Tennessee may be a little wider from east to west, and then I'd say it's almost like the distance from us to twice the yeah. So it's almost like the distance from maybe Louisville to Birmingham in terms of north to south too.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a pretty big place, right?
For an island, absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah. A large island. So, where were we? So we were talking about Hyanustar with its vineyards, and then we got Hyanustar, which is the southeast lands. And by the way, perfect time to use SpeakPipe to correct my pronunciation on any of this stuff, people. Just FYI. Shipbuilding timber. Hyanustar was where they got most of their shipbuilding, and we learned later on that the people of Númenor really loved the sea. Like that was their thing.
Well, they would have to. I mean, they're surrounded by water.
Yes.
I mean, except for the middle lands.
But I'm just pointing that out because it makes special emphasis on that towards the end of the
chapter.
chapter.
I know. It does make special emphasis on that. But I was just kind of like, well, yeah, they would have to be.
But it also
live on an island.
But it also just sounds like a really beautiful place. So
it sounds amazing.
Do you have to be? Like, you could just be like, this is paradise and we don't really need anything outside of this island.
Well, no, not that you need anything outside of it, but just a love of the water that surrounds you, I think, is natural.
Yeah.
Anyway. I don't see how you could live on an island and not enjoy the sea.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying. Anyway,
okay.
Moving on.
Okay. I was just thinking about that deeply.
I can tell.
Yeah.
Which was not really my intent.
I was trying to find a way to push back and prove you wrong.
And you just couldn't.
What's the point?
Because you know I'm right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Orostar, Eastlands. This was I wrote down for this. This was the grain land. So this is I guess where a lot of the grain for the island was grown. Although it says that they were just abundant fish all around the island, right? So many of the people were fishermen,
Okay.
So and like they're like kind of their hardiest people were fishermen. So I guess their main staples of their diet were fish, grain, and wine.
Sounds very
Mediterranean. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say Grecian, but I knew that wasn't the right word.
Yeah.
I could get on board with that. I know you wouldn't care for the fish part.
Yeah, but maybe if I grew up on Numenor, maybe I would be a little more amenable to it.
You probably have to be.
There were probably like some, there's probably like some good livestock. You can get a good burger there, I'm sure.
Do you think so?
I don't know. I hope so.
I'm thinking probably not.
If you can't get a burger there, then this ain't paradise. I'm just saying.
That's true. At least Jimmy Buffett wouldn't think so.
There's a reason Jimmy Buffett wrote
That's
that song.
right.
All right. So those are the 5 peninsulas: Forostar, Andustar, Hyanustar, Hярostar. So I guess Hyar means south. So Foro, Andu, Hyar, and Oro. Interesting.
Okay.
I'm just thinking about. I'm trying to do my my roots, my Newmanorian roots here.
I can tell.
So, and then we have the Mittelmar, right, which is the inlands. All right, so that's this region on the inner part of the island.
Mm-hmm.
And at the center, there's really 2 big things to note about the Mittelmar. The first is the city of Arundor, which is the King's Land. All right, or the region. I'm sorry, the region of Arundor. And there's Armanelos in this area, which is the city, right? The city of the king. Oh, there goes my map again. All right, so, and then you've got the Tarma, and the Tarma is the sacred mountain, right?
Is that what's on the cover of my book, you think?
No, that's not what that is.
Oh,
that is. Oh, what is that again? I've looked that up again, and I think it's something from the first age, if memory serves. So
okay.
But yeah, the Tarma is the sacred mountain, and it's I guess Tarma stands for the pillar of the heavens. There are lots of birds on Númenor. In fact, their mariners say that even if you were to lose sight, you could still steer back to Númenor just by the sound of birds.
Sound of birds. All different kinds.
Yes, indeed.
Eagles got special mention, I remember.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it was like from the littlest, and we'll get back to the eagles because they come up on when we talk about religion. I want to save discussion of the religion for the very end, even though it kind of comes early in the chapter.
Okay.
All right. So, and then it also made a point that, like, especially early on, like Númenor the Númenorians really loved horses, and so much so that most of the roads were unpaved. Right.
Right, because that was their main way of transportation.
Because they didn't have a lot of use for wheels. In fact, a lot of their heavier transportation needs just were done by sea, right?
Yes.
So,
which makes sense.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there were a few paved roads, but for the most part, it was they preferred travel by horse, which is kind of lovely to think about.
It really
right?
is.
The society based on that, where there's not a lot of need for. This is
for
very
more modern
super,
transportation.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. And I love too what it said about how, like especially those families that were men and women that had special, like were especially close with their horses.
Yeah,
could summon them just by thought alone.
Yeah,
which is really cool to think about, having that kind of connection with your pet, with your animal.
Yeah, that is really cool. There's a note. There was a link to something in my in my Kindle, it linked to something that says the Newmanorians in their own land possessed horses, which they esteemed, but they did not use them in war, for all their wars were overseas. Also, they were of great stature and strength, and their fully equipped soldiers were accustomed to bear heavy armor and weapons. In their settlements on the shores of Middle-earth, they acquired and bred horses, but used them little for riding, except in sport and pleasure. In war, they were used only by couriers and by bodies of light-armed archers, often not of Númenorian race. In the War of the Alliance, such horses as they used had suffered great losses, and a few were available in Osgiliath. So, anyway, they were not really horses of war either, but they were still pretty incredible beasts. Mm-hmm. So,
is there mention of any of these? Because I know that there's some really cool. Is it Shadowfax?
Shadowfax.
Was he a Númenorian?
Yeah, I didn't look that up. So let me see if we can.
I was just curious because I was thinking about how awesome Shadowfax was, and I was like, I wonder if he has his roots on Númenor, because I couldn't remember.
Shadowfax. Shadowfax.
He came from Rohan.
Yeah, he came from Rohan, which I think we
Yeah.
knew. I know we talked a lot about him back when we were going through Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
So I don't know. Maybe if you go back far enough, he's somehow
Maybe he has an
descendant.
ancestor
Yeah.
from Numenor. Yeah,
That would seem fitting.
it would. It
Seem
would.
fitting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I loved the whole thing about that some of them were able to communicate with their horses by thought alone.
Mhm.
That's cool kind of Tolkien stuff right
It
there.
is. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah. So let's see. The Númenorians loved treasure. They brought a lot with them to Númenor when they first settled, but Númenor was not really abundant in providing the raw materials for treasure. So they kind of brought a lot of treasure with them, but that was all they really had, which it sounds like they were fine with for a long time until maybe when the shadows started to fall upon them and greed started to kind of seep in, and then they were like,
That's how they were corrupted, was through their love of treasure.
Partly, for sure, yeah. They were not a warlike culture, at least at first. They many of the Edain, the original settlers of the island, brought with them their weapons, but and lots of the Edain had skills for weapon making, but as you know, those skills were really passed down in the form of like making of tools, because this was not intended to be an island of a militaristic people. It was given as a reward, as a gift to the people who had served in the war, but this was to be a place of peace. Right.
Yeah.
Which, I thought was really cool. So that's another thing, is it starts off as not necessarily pacifistic, but a peaceful culture. And you can even see just from our discussion of the Tale of Years that it over time it transformed into a more warlike culture, bent not so much on like helping other men back in Middle Earth, but on like conquest and and the spoils of war.
Right.
So maybe another theme to be aware of as we get into this world.
In fact, doesn't it says something in here too about how they were actually they were insulted when the men of Middle Earth would use these things against them, or it said something.
Oh yeah, it says it was indeed their grievance when the shadow crept along the coast and men whom they had befriended became afraid or hostile, that iron was used against them by those to whom they had revealed it.
Right.
Yeah.
So they felt kind of betrayed by sharing
this knowledge with these men, and then it was turned against them. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, and then and like we said earlier, they took delight in the sea beyond all other things, and this really began with Hyanustar. This is toward the end there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Captain of the king's ships under Tar Elendil first achieved the voyage to Middle Earth in around 600 years into the history of the Second Age, and he brought his ship Entolese, which signifies return, into Mithlond on the spring winds blowing from the west, and he returned in the autumn of the following year. So he was the first one to make the voyage back to Middle Earth 600 years into the history, and then the story that comes next in Unfinished Tales, Aldarion and Erindis, the mariner's wife. That is, so Aldarion is married to Hyanustar's daughter, right? So that's kind of that story when we eventually do get to that story, which I think will be soon for us.
Cool.
So
right on.
So let's talk about their religion. Near the beginning of the chapter, it talks about the Meneltarma, the pillar of the heavens, which it says was sacred to the worship of Eru Iluvatar. And just for those who maybe haven't read the Silmarillion yet, Eru Iluvatar he's essentially the god. He is God, right? He is the one that creates everything. So this is, this is like this isn't one of the Valar or anything like that. This is the one who created the Valar, the Maiar, Melkor, everything. And so the Númenorians are worshippers of Eru Iluvatar, right? And so it says about the Meneltarma, though the lower slopes of the mountain were gentle and grass-covered, it grew ever steeper, and towards the summit it could not be scaled. But a winding spiral road was made upon it, beginning at its foot upon the south and ending below the lip of the summit upon the north. So the question arose as I was just reading this now about the spiral stair and whether they had made it, the people of Numenor, after they got there, or whether it was there for them when they arrived on the island, right?
Yeah, it's
Because
interesting.
it sounds like it'd be a pretty difficult thing to build a spiral stair up this
up
this
a mountain.
really tall mountain
Yeah.
where towards the summit it can't even be scaled, right? So I'm sure ancient people could figure out all kinds of amazing things, and I'm sure they could have, but it almost makes me think, because this is a sacred mountain, that this was given to them, and like maybe there were instructions for them on how to use this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I think that is because it goes on and it talks about how there was no temple here. Basically they did not, this was not some kind of like Númenorian made religion, right? This is almost like a religion that was given to them,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And it was like, as the people of Númenor, this is what you're going to do, right? So
that makes you think that the road was already
because
there.
there's no building, there's no raised altar, not even a pile of undressed stones ever stood there, right? That's what it says here.
Yeah. So I guess it makes sense.
Yeah.
That would have been provided the way it was.
And it reminds me a lot about like a lot of the stuff in the Old Testament when the religion of the Jews is first getting going, and there's a lot of prescriptions like this, right? Where it's like don't fashion like some kind of fancy altar for yours. Now that stuff does come later, but it's like don't fashion any kind of like fancy altar for yourself. Even their temple initially was like a tabernacle, right? They moved that it was mobile.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
It was
wasn't
supposed to go with them.
Right.
And before even the time of Moses, there was kind of this worship where there was no fixed altars or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
So in this way, it makes me think of that, and makes me think that like this religion was more about something being given to them rather than, which would be fitting with this island being called the Gift, right? Rather than something like they kind of came up with on their own.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you think about it, when men come up with things like this on their own, they want to build like altars, and they want to build temples and fancy stuff like that, right?
And they also have a really hard time agreeing on what to build and where and when. So it takes a long time to happen.
Well, this is true. Although if you had a giant mountain in the middle, that would probably seem like a pretty good place to do it.
Pretty good place, but you still have to figure out like the design of the building and like where. Yeah. Anyway, it seems like
you gotta put out some bids for architects and all this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Some will and a deal that's got to happen.
Mm-hmm. So the Valar obviously knew that.
Yeah.
Said, you know what? We'll tailor make it.
We're gonna save you the trouble, guys.
Here you go. This is the mountain. This is the road. This is what you do.
Here's what you're gonna do. We built you a spiral staircase. You're gonna climb the spiral staircase. You're gonna keep your lips zipped.
No talking.
Except 3 prayers. 3 prayers, not 4, not 2, 3 prayers.
So the Valar are from Brooklyn or New Jersey? What was that accent?
Forget about it. I don't. I don't even know. All right. Enough of that. All right.
No disrespect.
No disrespect
intended
whatsoever. Yes, because what is the saying that imitation is the most sincere form of flattery?
Most sincere. Yep. I think that's straight out of Anne of Green Gables.
I actually kind of agree with that very strongly.
I do too. And I try to.
You can do imitation in an obnoxious and mean-spirited way, but like I just love the different cultures and peoples of the earth, and my brothers and sisters of the human race.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's fun to pretend to be somebody else.
Yes.
For a second.
Yes.
So anyway,
I agree with all that.
That's John's philosophy of life for the day.
There we go.
Moving on. All right.
Back to religion.
So yeah. So all this is to say that this is not a this is a very stripped down, simple religion.
Very, very simple.
No other likeness of a temple did the Newmanorians possess in all the days of their grace until the coming of Sauron, which we don't hear anything about and hear about what happens there. But Sauron, apparently, it sounds like he twists the religion to want to have all kinds of temples and all kinds of other things.
Which is really weird. You would think he would just want to do away with it.
Well, when we read through a Calibaith again and do a little more of a deep dive on that, we're gonna we're going to talk about what that might mean, because I think it talks more about that in there.
Okay.
So, see, I think this religion thing is really going to be key to doing this story, to doing the Second Age well, because I think this was a. It's hard to say it was like a super important to like your everyday Númenorian, but when you talk about the things like the shadow and the fear of death and this religion that they have here, these are all very important things, and there's obviously a change that happens in the history that's somehow related to this, to this system of worship, right? So they have the three prayers. And what this means is the king would go up on the Middletarma 3 times a year. The first was at the beginning of spring, the second was at midsummer, and the third was the end of autumn. And at these times, the king ascended the mountain on foot, followed by a great concourse of the people clad in white and garlanded, but silent. And at other times, the people were free to climb to the summit alone or in the company, but it is said that the silence was so great that even a stranger, ignorant of Númenor and all of its history, if he were transported thither, would not have dared to speak aloud. No bird ever came there, save only eagles. If anyone approached the summit, at once 3 eagles would appear and alight upon 3 rocks near to the western edge. But the times of the 3 prayers they did not descend, remaining in the sky and hovering above the people. They were called the witnesses of Manwe, and they were believed to be sent by him from Aman to keep watch upon the holy mountain and upon all the land. So, so they don't take tools, weapons. They don't speak at all, except for the king offering these 3 prayers at 3 different times of the year, and people were free to visit it, but you just kept silence when you were there.
Yeah, and it sounds like it wasn't even a chore. Like, it wasn't even hard to keep silent. Like, because if they said that even a complete stranger wouldn't dare speak. So it was clearly like, I don't want to say enchanted, but it was kind of like there was almost some kind of atmosphere, some kind of deference or reverence that was implicit in just the surrounding air.
Almost like nature was relevant. Like nature respected this as a sacred place.
And birds never even came there, it said, except eagles.
Except for the eagles, who were kind of keeping watch over it for Manwe.
Right. Which is interesting to me that the eagles only came down when like not during the 3 times of the year, right? Mm-hmm. So the 3 times of the year during all those 3 special processions, the eagles stayed above and hovered. But when people came to visit on their own, they came down.
Maybe they were trying to make sure that people kept silent.
Oh, that's why they were hovering?
No, when they came down.
Oh, because it was known to keep silent during the procession. Like, that was understood.
Well, no, but the king is offering the 3 prayers, so they hover at that time, right?
But why don't they come down at that time? That's what I'm wondering.
Because they're offering the 3 prayers, and then the eagles come down at other times, because and to kind of remind people to keep silence, right?
I see.
I don't know. I'm speculating here. I'm speculating here, but
that makes sense. And Manwe he's like the head Valar guy, right?
Yeah. So Manwe is somehow kind of like kind of keep overseeing this worship, right? Through the work of the eagles, and but this is it's really fitting that the Númenorians would be worshiping Iluvatar here, because they are children of Iluvatar, right? Mm-hmm. They're one of the 2 races of the children of Iluvatar. Mm-hmm. So
and it's cool too when you mention the Old Testament. I mean, there's lots of things that happen on mountains in the Old Testament.
Totally.
And this really kind of reminded me of Moses and him going up to get the 10 Commandments or whatever, but the people never went with him. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that the people go with the king,
right,
in this religion.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So anyway, I look at this about the religion, and I really hope that that the writers of the show don't shy away from this particular topic, but that they really give it the due that it deserves, right? Because when you think about like the king going to do this, and the fact that somehow Sauron eventually corrupts this, it's obviously something important to this, to the overall arch of this age, and the story of this age, and the story of Númenor. Mm-hmm. So I'm just really looking forward to seeing this particular aspect of the story explored, along with other things for sure, but definitely this part of it explored.
Same.
So, all right. So yeah, any other thoughts on this chapter you want to share with everybody? Gwen?
No, I just want to say that this episode was actually, I really enjoyed it.
Well, good.
I hope our listeners did as well.
I hope so too. Darn Garshnart.
It was just really, you know, when I just glanced at the subject matter, I thought,
Yeah,
but it was cool. I enjoyed it.
It definitely. So I'm trying to pull up our Facebook page here because I wanted to show you. There was one thing associated. There was one piece of news that I'm aware of from this week associated with the show, and that was the announcement of another actor for the show.
Oh, that's big news.
In this case, it was a male actor.
Okay.
And this was his name is Will Poulter, and apparently he played Eustace in Voyage of the Dawn Treader years ago, right? Which
I'm not sure I ever saw that. I know we listened.
We didn't see it, but we just listened to the audiobook. So.
Well, we have the DVD.
Yeah, but
I
you and I
guess
have
we've
never
watched it. Okay.
But
he plays Eustace.
Like who would you say he's going to be playing? Who would you say he's going to be playing?
Based on his looks?
Based on his looks.
Well, I don't feel like I'm familiar enough with the cast of the show. I mean, with the different characters of the show.
Go look at a picture of this guy, people. Maybe pause it right here, and if you haven't already seen a picture of him, and just think, Google Will Poulter or Lord of the Rings TV actors. Pause right now, and then coming back. Tell me if that doesn't look like Elrond, a young Elrond minus about 3,000 years.
Oh my gosh, I think you're right.
Those eyebrows, those are totally Elrond's eyebrows.
Whoa, that's actually really kind of freaky.
No, it's funny because I was just like, I posted this to our Facebook page, and I was like, those are Hugo Weaving's eyebrows. So,
so you think he's been a young Elrond?
I mean, he could be just about any elf in my mind.
He's definitely got to be an elf, though. I think,
or maybe because the Edain many of them are part elves, right? Part elves. So maybe he's Elros.
Oh, that's true.
Maybe he's Elros.
True. Could be.
Maybe he's just a later Númenorian king, or maybe he is Elrond. Maybe he's a younger Elrond, right? So,
how about
I mean,
that?
I guess Elrond would look different 4,000 to 5,000 years before the Lord of the Rings. Would look slightly younger.
Slightly
younger.
Yeah, I agree.
It's kind of funny to think about, elvish aging over the course of many thousands of years.
Right.
Anyway, so just a little note: you can go over to our Facebook page and check out a picture of Will Poulter, and there's a link to the article on Variety that tells you more about his background. And there's no clue as to who he's actually going to be playing, so we know who two actors who have been cast for the show.
Well, there you go. Moving forward.
All right. Yes, we are, slowly but surely.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think that's all we've got. Right. Next week's episode is mailbag, so make sure you get that. Make sure you get those correspondence items into us at TolkienRoadPodcast@gmail.com if you want to be heard on that episode. And thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you guys.
Oh, hey, by the way, make sure you head on over to the Tea with Tolkien podcast, where I was a guest on a recent episode talking about the Silmarillion. So head on over to Tea with Tolkien. Caitlin Festista, who runs the Tea with Tolkien podcast, has been a guest on our podcast before, and she does good work. And I had a lot of fun doing that interview. And you should definitely check out her podcast. Subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. Say nice things about her and help her out because she's doing good work over there. So
yes, sirree.
All right.
All right.
Thanks again to our patrons. You all rock. Al Taylor, Andrew Herbert, Andrew Thomas, Asia Viner. Sorry,
I was all ready to jump in. Austin Braswell,
Bethany Engler,
Brendan Corkery,
Brian Orr,
Caitlin Howe,
Kat Lane,
Chris Loftus,
Chuck Farnung,
Connor Fogarty,
Daniel Delaney,
Daniel Peridot.
I think that's right. he gave me pronunciation, so I was going to say Peridot. So I think that's right.
Peridot?
I think so.
Okay. Peridot.
We're trying, Danny.
We're really trying, Danny. Thanks for being a patron.
Absolutely. David Bates.
David Bigwood.
Emilio Perea.
Hunter Johns.
Ish of the Hammer.
James Applegate.
James Lindbergh.
Joe Towns.
John Rice.
Margaret Lyon.
Matt Scarrett.
Robert Franks.
Robert Sleeth.
Sarah Murphy.
Shannon Stockbridge.
Teresa Colangelo.
Ty Miller.
Tyler Shelley.
Dr. William Hutton.
Zeke Farmer.
All right. That's all we got. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yes, thank you, guys.
We will talk at you next time.
Indeed we will.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.